Whew, okay, we're making it through this week. so, um, I wanted to talk about something I have been researching. Now, this is not something I really thought I'd go back and start researching, but because it's important to somebody that I care about, I decided that I was going to research it. Hey, Mario, nice to see you. So, the question is, um, comes down to is God masculine or feminine or both, right? Um, there is, of course, there's a lot of people that talk about how aspects of God, or God the Mother, God the Father, right? To me, I have always felt that God had no gender, right? Because that would be, I think, silly, right? The energetic force of the universe is not like in a body or physical body or male or female or anything like that. It's just the energetic force of the universe, the source. But some people like to go to a particular book and dig into that. Hey, Harshita, nice to see you too. So, um, because my boyfriend, he is very into this. I said, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to actually research it read the original Hebrew, read what the original scholars are saying. And last night I couldn't sleep, which is unfortunate and really annoys me when it happens. It's been happening more recently. So I was up about 3 in the morning and I said, okay, instead of watching, more episodes of WandaVision, I will take a look at this question. Nice to see you. Good evening, Ashita. So I started researching to figure this out, and I found out some very interesting stuff, which is actually kind of in line with what I thought. So um, the thing about uh, ancient Hebrew, right, or biblical Hebrew, is that it has gendered pronoun. It has gendered, how would we put it? Gendered nouns, right? So like Spanish, you have, where you say a certain noun is either masculine or feminine, and then you use a masculine or feminine pronoun with it. So Hebrew is like that, right? Whereas in English, we can say something is a table and it's just an it, right? We have an it pronoun and not masculine or feminine. In Hebrew, they don't have that. If you say a table, the table is masculine, so it would use a male pronoun like he with the table, right? So that's very interesting. They didn't actually use a ton of pronouns. They would change the verb a little bit to be a masculine verb if it was being used with a masculine noun. So just because they were using a masculine form of a verb or a masculine noun did not mean that the thing itself was, in fact, had a gender, right? Like a table. Okay. So, and the very cool thing is that the in the Hebrew, so this is what I was studying for 2 hours last night, right? And I have not come to a conclusion because I haven't finished the study yet, just so you know. This is kind of what I discovered so far. When you're studying that in the original Hebrew, the certain names of God are used as masculine and certain are feminine. And this is in the Hebrew Bible, right? So Shekinah, which is seen as the presence of God, that is feminine. It's used with a feminine pronoun. And the masculine, like El, like people think El, right? Or Elohim, that's actually plural. That's another word used for God, but that's plural, right? Ashita says, yes, I love Spanish and learning it. Hey, Jay, nice to see you. All right, so these are very interesting things. And these are challenging things. Like for me, when I learn different languages, because I have learned some Spanish and Portuguese and Russian, right? And Chinese, right? So Chinese, fortunately, does not have any of that, which is nice. I prefer it that way, right? It always gets confusing for me when we're referring, you have to remember what gender a table or a chair is, right? But it's interesting because it shapes how the culture views things, right? The language shapes the entire culture. So when you genderize everything, make it masculine or feminine, you're putting a much stronger emphasis on the masculine and the feminine versus cultures who have languages that don't do that, that use the form of it a lot, right? So the ancient Hebrew did not have an it, didn't say non. Everything had some kind of masculine or feminine genderization, but it didn't necessarily have to be masculine. It didn't mean it was masculine or feminine. Harshita says start learning Chinese and Korean too. Wow, goodness. You must be smart if you're going to try to learn all those languages. Very cool. Good for you. Um, and interestingly enough, the name of God, right, which is called the tetragrammaton. Okay, it's a big long word meaning four-letter name, four-letter word. That's the big word that means four-letter word. So it seems silly to make such a huge word to mean that, right? To say short word. So it is like a Y. Yahweh, right? So it's like a Y, I think it's a YHWH, right? And so that is, it's known as the Tetragrammaton. So they don't have any vowels in it, like so the ancient Hebrew in the Bible, in a lot of places where you see the word the Lord or something like that, it's actually using that name. But the name is only consonants; it doesn't have vowels in it. So people debate a lot about how to pronounce it, but each letter stands for something. And so the first letter is masculine, second letter is feminine, next letter is masculine, the next letter is feminine. Interesting, right? So in the actual name, it's an equal mix of masculine and feminine in the letters that make up that name for God, right? Which is used over 6,000 times in the Bible, which I didn't realize because most of our English translations don't actually put it in very often. They actually swap it out and use the term the Lord, right? Instead, God or something like that. So that's what term that is pronounced. People pronounce it as Jehovah, Jehovah, or Yahweh. But that term, the letters of it are equally masculine and feminine. Who knew, right? So this is just some interesting stuff that I've been looking into, right? And so then some scholars are saying, well, God is always referred to in the masculine, like as the father or the protector or the husband, right? But there's actually also chapters in Isaiah where God is referred to in the feminine, as the mother, or as with the feminine qualities as well. So it's definitely not like straightforward there answer. It does seem to and a lot of scholars, even like rabbis and scholars of it, do say that it's not a one or the other. It's not a masculine or feminine. The concept of God is beyond that. It's the combination of everything. It's a combination of all. So it's a combination of both, right? And so that's really important. And why am I talking about this? Because what happens, hey Dark Moon, what happens when we refer to God as a he, as only a he, or as only a she, right? Then we're separating out the qualities that the all that it is, right? We're making it feel like it's more human, like he or she, right? Like a masculine or feminine, male, female, woman, man, which God is not, right? It's an energy source. I mean, there's an energy source is not masculine or feminine. And then at the same time, we are only giving those qualities to God that it belong to that gender. So, and then even worse, and this is something that women notice more than men, right, is the issue of the patriarchal society and how God has been associated with men and things that are masculine and male, which allows them to put those things up as being more important and women as less important, and feminine qualities as less important, right? And that allows the patriarchy, right? The people who are fighting against women and the strength of women and the position of women and trying to keep women down, it just puts that into our conscious culture that that God is somehow masculine, right? And that's what really gets me. So that's why I'm doing the research, because I want to see, if you go back to the earliest texts, if you go back and actually study this, is it as black and white as it looks like in the English? And it really isn't. And that's kind of cool. It really isn't, actually. And so, like I said before, God, even one of the names of God and the presence of God is actually feminine, and it takes a feminine noun. So, sorry, it takes a feminine verb and pronoun. And the others are more, they're used in the masculine, and they take a masculine pronoun, but that is not definitive as to a masculine or feminine when you're talking in a language that genderizes everything. So Harshita says using the before God means it's universal. Right. Okay. So that's yeah. So the term God itself, God or goddess, right? Actually, some of the terms in the old Hebrew, they can be used, like Elohim can be used to mean God, goddess, gods, plural, right? So that's even more interesting, right? But she says if you use the before God means it's universal, right? So I think what you're saying is like the God or the one God or something like that. But it still doesn't solve our problem of a masculine feminine pronoun, right? So when we talk about God, always using he, and it bugs me when I do it. But the problem is in English, we don't have a non-genderized yet living pronoun. When we say it doesn't have a gender, but it makes it an object, not a living thing. So I've always thought that we needed a pronoun for God that describes something that is alive and yet not a gender, and yet is, but it's a specific pronoun that can be referred to for God. And some languages have this pronoun. Some languages have it, but we don't have it in English. We just use he for everything or man for stuff, and that's part of this patriarchal consciousness, that using a he or a masculine or a man can cover all of the people in humanity, which it doesn't, obviously, right? And that's part of the challenge, right? So when we say, and I have the same issue with the Constitution, right? Where you can't just say where they say all men are created equal, right? The Constitution of the United States, it says all men are created equal. It doesn't say all people, right? Which is what it should say. It says all men are created equal. And then everyone argues, oh, well, that's meant to represent humanity as a whole, that everyone is created equal. I'm like, no, they said men, and they said men for a reason. And if you talk to the Supreme Court Justice, he even said he said clearly, he said, no, it doesn't include women. It doesn't mean women, right? When the founding fathers wrote it, they were not trying to include women. So even though now we want to reinterpret it as being a universal, it wasn't, right? And so how has that affected our whole culture? How has that affected how we interact? How has that affected our laws, our subconscious, everything, right? It does affect us. We think it doesn't, but it affects us. So that's what I'm trying to get at, the subconscious impact on us of using genders to refer to things that should be inclusive of everything. It can make that particular gender, by associating it with something like God or with, all men are created equal, it makes that gender seem more elevated than it is necessarily, right? And by default makes the other gender lower, which is why this is so important to me, which is why I'm talking about this, right? So this is why I'm researching it, is to understand and to discover, because when we take things from another language, an original language in a totally different culture, and translate it into English, so these subtleties get lost, and we don't understand the original, the way the language worked or anything like that, that there were differences in there, right? And then people are allowed to put their own or in and say, hey, this is what we are. People put their or in and they say, hey, God is masculine. We're just going to refer to God and all these things as male. When even in the original scriptures, some terms for God were feminine, right? Even for the Hebrew God, right? So that's what's really interesting to me, because we talk about how the Judeo-Christian God is the masculine and blah, but in fact it not completely. And even a lot of scholars agree, who go back to the original, that God was not genderized in that way. So interesting, huh? Anyway, I'm going to do further research on this and I will let you know what I discover. But of course, there are people on both sides of the camp on this. But I think that to a large part, people agree about God being not a particular gender, God being above that, right? God is spirit, right? There's lots of things in the Bible that talk about that. I think my issue is that when we use a particular pronoun all the time, right? So sometimes I even say he, she, or, like when we use one pronoun, whether it is a he or a she, right? Then we are dividing it and we are putting aside some of the qualities that should belong to the whole. And so that's why I think we need a new pronoun in the English language. But anyway, letting you in on my little bit of research. I would say midnight research, 3 a.m. research last night. Well, I decided to go and investigate this stuff and figure it out. Harshita says, now I get your point. Good. Yes. Yeah. You see, now you get the point of why this actually is an important concept and why we should talk about it, because of the follow-on impact it has on society and our thinking and our roles and our rights and everything. Yes, it needs to make a proper noun. Yes, it should be a proper noun. It should be its own noun that just refers to God, right? So anyway, I hope you guys have an amazing and beautiful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.